It's that consciousness. It's just there. It's always there. It's ever present. No matter what I do, there's that consciousness. It's permeating everything I think. Oh wait, that's what consciousness is. Trying to separate consciousness from the reality of living is impossible because they are one and the same. Consciousness is what gives us our reality. So, with that out of the way, what the hell is consciousness anyway, and why did we evolve to have it? Simple questions with very complicated answers, or no answers. I grew up wondering why we as humans are set apart from animals, and as I got older, I began to realize the similarities, of course, and the differences, but also that humans are nothing really extreme as far as setting them apart from animals, except for our consciousness. We have the same amount of digits, teeth, hair, the usual thing. We're animals, but we're animals that developed a consciousness. Now, humans have been making tools for a long time, 2 million years. The simple stone head tool that we use for everything for so long. It was just passed on. And then all of a sudden, which seems like in a blink of an eye, we all started to not just create, shelters, but also use, I guess what set humans apart was when we started making beads and creating art. Because creating art insinuates that a person is planning and organizing something to decorate themselves, to look a certain way, or something that's not just for survival. Extracurricular activities in the cave, if you will. And this gives, at least to me, a sense that at this point, see, recently they found some beads in a cave that were like 45,000 years old, and these were the oldest artifacts ever found to showing that humans had actually created and made these little beads. And it means that around 50,000 years ago we had time to be bored, or time to decorate ourselves, or time to expand on our, what it means to be alive. And through that action of creating and decorating and painting caves, it's believed that our evolution took on a whole new direction, and that our brains started working differently, and that humans perhaps began selecting for brain activity, I should say thinking ability, rather than peacocking. In other words, the human's brain could be compared to the peacock's feathers, that somebody would be seeking a smart mate rather than a beautiful mate. Now, this is a theory, and I find it a little bit preposterous, because there would have to be a point, not preposterous, but there would have to be a point where people began, abandoning looks for brains, and that hasn't happened yet. It's still in our genetics. It's still something inherent that we carry on. We're always looking for a beautiful mate. Now, of course, we can think past that and realize if we see somebody that's not that great looking, that we may be able to look past that because we love them and we think that they're a great person inside. But if the outside doesn't match the inside and vice versa, then it often doesn't work. A person has to be physically and emotionally attracted. So in the animal kingdom, we're attracted to looks, physique, as well as activity, how an animal acts, and how an animal, all the different animals choose their mates is very, some birds do these crazy dances and they're lucky to find a mate. And once a year, there's maybe a week period where you can go out and find a mate. For humans, we can mate at any time we want. We no longer rely on, seasons, or making sure that the baby's born in the spring so they get a good start, so they're not born in the dead of winter or whatever it may be. In other words, we've thrown the clocks out. We no longer have to sleep when it's dark. It gives us a lot of extra time to think. And so before I get too far off conscious here, I want to say, what is consciousness and why do we have it? Why did we evolve with it? What is the purpose? And that's the big question I'm asking. And it's not just a question I'm just throwing out there randomly. This is something I've been looking into for years. Not that I'm expecting to find an answer, or somebody's going to present me with, oh, this is why humans evolved to have consciousness. Because I know that science or religion or any of these aspects of searching can never find the true reason why we evolved. People may believe that they understand what God is. They may believe they understand why the creatures evolve in totally separate sides of things, but to actually try to create a theory of why humans evolved consciousness is a complicated thing, because at this point we could say that our consciousness helps us to survive. In other words, we could say that humans selectively chose intellect over brawn because it was easier to make a lever to move a rock than to be a big dumbass and just try to lift it. In other words, using your head, you could get a lot more done. And we've seen that this is a fact, because look at what society's done. Look how we've evolved. As for when we decided to go from making simple tools to all of a sudden creating these metal tools and making these amazing structures and buildings, people might say it has to do with time, and this is true, but as soon as we harness fire, we'd put rocks in the fire, and those rocks would bleed out metals. And we would see the metals harden, and people would be using them for things. And they did, anytime they could. But the point was that we didn't have any need to create anything greater at that point. We were hunting, gathering, everything was working fine. Why did we not remain that way? Why did nature decide, well, I'm going to take a complicated evolutionary route and make these people think deeply about why they're here and how they exist and why they exist? I'm not saying that nature decided to have us realize these things. I'm saying that these things that we realize are a byproduct of nature's decision to give us consciousness. So, with all that said, my question is always the same. What is the end to consciousness? And I'm setting aside theories about God or theories about, belief systems, and just saying, as for what we know as humans, you and I sitting here, consciously doing what we're doing. You're observing the video, I'm creating the video. I'm creating the video knowing that in the future you'll be watching the video, and you're watching the video knowing that in the past I created the video. We understand time and the concepts of time. We've found calendars tens of thousands of years old. People have always been trying to mark the days to figure out how long things are and what the endurance is of a certain, say, night time, so we know when to plant crops or when the sun starts to rise again, the seasons, the solstice. And we discovered these things because they helped us. So many of our discoveries about the stars and when we look at ancient history, it seems like, well, how did they know so much about astronomy? And it's because they had to. They knew that understanding these processes and these cycles that their ancestors had told them verbally about, that they would be able to have better crops, better chance of survival. And pretty soon the verbal passing on down of stories just wasn't enough, and so they created signs and symbols for language, and very simple signs turned into very complicated languages, and here we are today with the consciousness and all these languages. And we're yearning for something even moving forward toward more conscious, more awareness. We have no choice at this point. It's like they say, once you've waken up, you can't go back to sleep. And once you've waken up as a species, you can't go back to sleep as a whole. You can play ignorant, but here we are. We're living this life. You and I have to live this conscious life. So, my point here is that it's a burden. Is consciousness a burden on us more than it's actually an advantage to our species? Eliminating the aspect of whether people believe that God wants us to be conscious or if there is a God or anything like that. Just to say, as an evolutionary trait, how does consciousness help us? Now, we know today it helps us in a way because, we have the ability to create and learn and carve sticks for weapons, do whatever we need. And we think that this is something that's just been that we've evolved into knowing. But if you go into a dark, put your kid into a dark room when they're born and you raise them with no external influences, they'll be no smarter than, an ape. They don't just know how to create. We're not just born into these artistic states and these aware, amazing, contemplative states. These are things that we've learned. So a human raised in isolation will be more like an ape, unable to really converse and explain themselves. So my point is that the ancestors have brought us to where we are now. All of our ancestors have given us the ability to reason. But it's not just the brain that we're born with, it's the brain that we develop living around other people who are communicating, and we develop like traits. So in the past, perhaps the brains of our ancestors were just as capable of learning everything that we're learning today, because the brain size hasn't really changed that much. It's just a matter of using your brain power for other things rather than reason, because when your brain takes 20% of your energy, that's a lot. So if you're using all your time to think, you're going to get eaten by a lion. But now the lions are people, and we have to think in order to not get eaten by the lion. So reason, our faculty of rationality and reason and consciousness, has become something we have to protect us, not against nature anymore, but against each other. And along with that fear of others taking what we have, so we have to have intelligence to defend ourselves, we also have this thing called altruism, where we know that we want to share with other people because it helps us too in the long run. We've created all these little value systems and morals, and the question to a lot of people present is, are these really natural laws or just human laws? And so we sort through, find out for ourselves. Those are my thoughts for the morning. So evolve on, and I'll talk to y'all later.